All right, next up is John Pye from the OTN, and he's going to be talking about the data center and all the new nodes coming online.
Hey, that's me. I'm also sneaking in a talk about OTN just generally, like for those of you who are showing up and hearing OTN all the time and wondering what the heck we're doing here. Hopefully this will shed some light on why it's really cool and important for me to come and play a role as you guys build out this amazing collaborative network. So that's me. My title is Director of Data Operations. That is the most formal thing about me. Nothing will ever approach that level of formality. But I'm here to go over a bit about what the Ocean Tracking Network does, what our mandate and our mission is from our funders. So we're meant to be a global infrastructure network. We're funded by the Canadian Foundation for Innovation, and I'm standing here at Dalhousie University. We're funded currently as a major science initiative, which means we're an infrastructure program that is meant to provide scientific infrastructure to our partners. So that means we provide gear and field support, but as a data manager, our contribution is digital infrastructure. We've been operating this way since 2015, but we've been around since 2008, supporting Canadian and international research by deploying ocean monitoring equipment in key locations around the world and training successive academic generations of movement ecologists and biogeographers. So more recently, we've increased our focus on physical and chemical oceanography and limnography as well. So we've got ROVs, we've got autonomous gliders out there as well. But our goal overall is to establish partnerships across a global community of stakeholders to document the movement of aquatic animals in the changing ocean. So the knowledge that is collected by all of you is made useful to policymakers, industry, indigenous and coastal communities, and the general public. Um, I think we're doing a good job. Having seen everything I've seen so far this morning, I'm thrilled to see how far everyone is running with this collaborative network. The new news is that we are being invited to change our designation to a major research facility. What that means is we would become roughly like US IUS as a line item designation in the Canadian budget. In terms of funding stability, we would no longer have to constantly prove ourselves on a short reporting cycle. It has a bunch of other advantages that aren't interesting, but what it represents, I think, is a continued evolution of this program and a recognition of all the hard work that has paid off in the previous iterations of OTN into this lasting research infrastructure that the government of Canada values and wants to see grow. So I have you all to thank for this, as you'll see, but it's very good news for us. It's a lot of paperwork right now, but it's very good news for us. So in 2023, we were awarded a renewal of our Major Science Initiative money. So we're funded through 2029, no matter what happens. And this funding helps us continue to support this global network and expand our database and database notability to absorb other forms of telemetry data like pit tagging and satellite telemetry data. So those things are coming online in the coming years. With this renewal also came a new strategic plan, which I will forgive you for not having read, and a rededication to our core principles, which are track, connect, and transform. So we'll just dig in a little bit to each of those to give you a sense of why it is we do the things we do. So raising the profile of tracking data to answer stock management questions, operating and cataloging our progress as a project of the UN Decade of Ocean Science. These are things that you might file under track, but the most major success for OTN to date has been our equipment loaner program. So this is a direct example of getting out there and adding physical infrastructure to the world. OTN buys receivers, way more than we could ever service ourselves, and we have this pool of receivers set up to support our partners in their own research activities. So we have this short application form that you can download from the website. You'll fill out whatever your science plan is going to be, and then we have the small group of folks that look over it and then distribute equipment to successful applicants. So a few hundred receivers are out there. They're designated for this purpose, and we'd really like you to consider getting them into the water for us. So to learn more, there's a QR code there. We're going to share the talks after. So if it flips by too fast and you miss a QR code, don't worry about it. Um, but yeah, we're very eager to see more applicants to this program, especially from the ACT network, which we feel has been a bit underserved by this so far. So please do consider us as a source of equipment going forward. And then connect. This is where data mobilization becomes important. So we'll hang out here because I'm a data guy. Making sure that we stay connected with groups like ACT and understand the data needs on an ongoing basis, but also stewardship of data standards. These things are important to the work that we all do. Connection is about training the next generation of telemetry practitioners, administering workshops, and creating learning opportunities, and expanding the capability of the node to include those new technologies we talked about before, but also to mobilize things like animal-borne oceanographic equipment data into forecasting models as part of the Anabos program. We also want to make sure that this stewardship is productive, it's inclusive, and it's collaborative. So we align with the FAIR principles and also the CARE and OCAP principles that are recommended by UNESCO to ensure knowledge is co-produced in ways that empower the local and indigenous knowledge holders to retain ownership and stewardship over their data. The pipelines we build will respect network data policies, but also aim to do the most good with the data that's being mobilized. So the specific example of Connect, how we meet this training goal is OTN Study Hall. So you might have heard about this already. Every week, myself and some of the people in this room, we get together and we have a freewheeling open forum virtual gathering. We aimed first to build a place where students and early career researchers could meet and get support from one another, share tools and methods, and explore solutions to common problems. It's a very informal, there's no judgment. It's just a bunch of folks gathering to problem solve. We've hosted these for a few years now. They've been instrumental in connecting researchers from labs all around the world. There's been great representation from ACT members, past and present. If you're not all zoomed out towards the back end of the week and you want to come by on Thursday afternoon, we'd welcome you to come and chat with us. It's the best part of my week. Okay, so transform is where we bring this hard-earned data to bear on policy in a targeted way by ensuring they're aligned with national and global conservation initiatives, and in a general way by ensuring that all this open data is available and understandable to the public. It's also about making sure new novel data collection methods get integrated into the shared system so everybody benefits when it comes online. I don't have any follow-up slide for this one. I'm actually going to lean on Joy's talk that's coming after mine as one of the most exciting things you can think about in terms of transform. So a lot of our strategic plan goals are about putting this new capacity into the world. The way OTN's data center fits in, the way we as data managers and data acquisition coordinators and programmers fit that infrastructure mission is by being this reliable, reproducible example of digital infrastructure. So the needs and concerns that researchers have that we as data managers can help satisfy when researchers are sharing data amongst themselves, combining these data holdings into one large data set, the key is to make sure everybody's coming up to a certain uniform standard and it comes to quality control. So we maintain and extend the standard that meets as many of the needs of our partners as we can while still being manageable for field work. If the instrument tells us something, we use the instrument. Otherwise, we have the human tell it to us and we quality control the crap out of it. This work is ongoing. A recent example would be, adding the map codes or the listenability of each of these receivers in a world where we have open protocol, where we have Nextrack, where we have the Gen 2 mappings. It's important to understand who can hear what. And so to do this job right, it's important that we keep listening to the community and understanding the developments on the ground, to listen for things that need capturing and looking for ways to make things easier on the people who are out there on deck getting the work done. We define and we harvest and we publish project level information to put in catalogs to make people aware that your guys' work is ongoing. Your future collaborators need to know what you're doing and what you can do for each other. And policymakers need to know what you're doing and your potential to answer their questions. So researchers who want to compare notes and metadata, to plan future deployments, to understand how programs rely on each other. This is some of what Jordan was trying to sort of build up here, is the ability to create a snapshot of what activity is happening and start to plan around that. And so at OTN, we support, we co-implement, and we share these common telemetry data analysis workflows as well. We partner with folks who are writing analysis packages and help backstop their efforts when they're serving the community and filling in important parts of the data pipeline. We want to make sure the data you create is going to be fit to walk into these analysis packages that the community is creating as well. So that's another role that we get to play as OTN data managers. So that's we, and then I decided I would include the baby picture that everybody has been including for years now, but it's the strongest bit of evidence of how powerful these collaborations can become. In 2020, Chuck Bangley published a paper that had the first version of this map on it. This is all the historic deployments that are available across OTN, ACT, and FACT. And since this paper was published, there's a South American network called Migramar that has further extended the reach of this system southward through the Mexican Gulf and into the Southern Caribbean. And the new nodes, ITAG and RAFT, are extending this coverage even further through the Gulf of Mexico and into the freshwater systems of the interior US. So here's nodes in practice. If we look at this coverage map, this intercompatibility lets people track animals on some truly amazing journeys. Together, we've delivered this example of how community and compatibility can create capacity. And so this has built the case for the support that we were hearing about earlier, not just with ITAG and RAFT, but also a pan-US Pacific node that's coming online called MPACT, which I've got a picture of later. So these success stories help also make the case for OTN to our funders. So this helps keep us around on an ongoing basis when we show the capacity that we can build together. And one of the ways that we make sure everybody's still available, high capacity, able to reckon with all the new tools that we're building up here in Halifax. Every year we host a node manager training. We were very pleased to welcome 13 representatives from 10 different OTN nodes around the world to Halifax this December. We took a week-long training in not just the basics, but also some of the new features of OTN nodes. So new advances in database management and cleaning, some new data visualization features, but also new data streams that we can process. So receivers that are on moving platforms, we have a standard workflow for that now. The ACT data managers were the seasoned veterans in the room this time. They really helped acclimatize the new people to what everyone was getting into. So we really were grateful to have you guys on site here helping bring people on board. So let's introduce these new folks. So RAFT, I mentioned, they're the U.S. River Systems. They're hosted at USGS's La Crosse office. Mary Beth Bray is your lead contact there with Doug Appel and Matt Walker, who are the node managers. There's also a small team of software developers there who are responsible for standing up the older edition of a tool called FishTrax that let people download tag, receiver, and detection data. So they have a different use case when it comes to what data should go public and at what speed. They're very into publishing everything. So prior to adopting the node database, they were doing that with just standard access data products. So historically, they've served the Illinois and the upper Mississippi rivers, but they're reaching out now and expanding to partners in other major U.S. rivers, state, academic, and federal agencies. ITAG are a group that should need little introduction. They've been a collaborative community in the Gulf since 2014, and they're one that we've always wanted to bring into the fold. So starting next month, we're laying out cyber infrastructure and beginning the process of loading ITAG's data into an intercompatible OTN node. We welcomed Claudia Fries and Hannah Godesman to Halifax last month. They took the training and they learned how to operate their new rig. So they'll be coming online in 2025. And if you make your way out west, the third new node that's coming online for the US in 2025 is the Northeast Pacific Acoustic Telemetry Group. They're hosted by NOAA Channel Islands and Senkus, but they cover, as Connie was saying, they cover the 4 Pacific RAs. They have the responsibility of tying together Alaska all the way down to Baja. So with help from our Canadian Pacific node in the middle, we have this, again, a contiguous line of coverage from all the way from Alaska to Southern California. So they've been working with telemetry a long time now. They've come out mostly of CSU Long Beach. And so it's possible we'll be able to migrate some of the historic SCAT and network data into this new NPAC node. So this is the game as I understand it. We share the processes. We can all do the same jobs in the same way. We can be intercompatible. We can cross-reference, and we can build the best possible data set for each researcher. The way that our networks have similar needs, have use cases that are similar. We can all respond to similar calls for new data. We all have opportunities and partnerships that are common across our different networks, but we also we discover new and unique use cases and configurations. Each of us individually, we run across new problems. We have new technologies we want to integrate, and then eventually everyone would have to become fluent in those. And so by building out this collaborative capacity, we're able to gain insight faster into what is next in the technology, in the analysis tools. Where is the community going? So as a link in the chain, sort of between researchers who are collecting the data and their global understanding of marine biodiversity, OTN and these partner nodes, we have the ability to work together across all of these regions and securely and accurately move this information towards decision makers and help researchers create change from local to global scales. So the global family picture, again, this is a little rougher, but I like to keep the location data pretty general. I'm a computer scientist by trade, more of a data person and a people person than a fish person. So my role is to make sure that we build and we expand these partnerships. The way that the OTN data team can help this is through the building of this connectivity and compatibility between data and among researchers who are collecting and interpreting it. But also on the quiet days where we're not doing that, the OTN data team and I are responsible for understanding what are the global data standards, what are the quality control frameworks that help build the trust in this system that we've created together. So in 2024, Shannon mentioned to you that we were certified by CoreTrust Seal, but later that year, we also had the data center accredited as an associated data unit of the International Oceanographic Data Exchange. And with both of these certifications in hand, we joined the World Data System. We secure these certifications for the shared global system to help people who are looking for data know that they can rely on what they see, this valuable resource in the observation network that we're all part of. If these are certifications or qualifications that are important to the policymakers you're talking to, or that you're trying to reach, or the funding application that you're writing, it may be valuable to mention that this is a system that guarantees the quality of the data pipelines that produce the knowledge they're looking for. And so that's the team, that's the game. And now it's time to talk about the data before I go. So at OTN, our data system leverages a few standard public data endpoints. So you can find project information and deployment histories on the OTN web portal. We also use data endpoints like GeoServer and AirDAP to express this data in a machine readable way. So you'll see Jordan was able to leverage that quite effectively to pull in the OTN part of the data for the RWSC map. This helps our data also live up to the FAIR data principles that we highlighted earlier all the way back in the strategic goals. FAIR data are data which meet principles of findability, accessibility, interoperability, and reusability. And there are several options available for you to see your data and metadata in the public sphere. So depending on your node's user agreement, some of these options are automatic and some of them are optional. Each network finds the level and velocity of sharing that their users are asking them for, with many funding opportunities that are hinging on the adherence to these FAIR principles. So we're working to enhance the ability of your data sharing network to publish your data on demand and help you meet your funding obligations. So when we talk about tools like GeoServer and AirDAP, there are ways for you to push your data through to places that your funders have told you they have to go, but there are ways for you to guarantee that your data is fair. They can also be useful tools, as Jordan is showing us, to help us plan out what the next year's deployment should be, to create outreach materials, to look up whether there will be receivers already in the area of a study that you intended to conduct. So ACT's user agreement, we're going to talk about that after the break. It's going to govern how the data is mobilized. And at present, it doesn't talk about mobilizing things like station data using these public endpoints. And each node is able to decide for themselves what their user agreement is. And so no matter what, the only thing we guarantee is that the tag owner's data and the policy for that data will be respected. But as OTN and the other networks are looking into making some small changes, here's an opportunity to sort of help the field operators plan out and execute future resource deployments to help create outreach materials that are going to have a greater impact. So consider these use cases when we're talking about making extensions to the user agreements, because they'll help us quickly mobilize the data for very good outcomes and help us adhere to the FAIR principles and make collaboration more fruitful for everybody. So 2 pipelines and I'm out. The first thing that we talked about was OBIS. So we did publish the first project from ACT to OBIS. It took a little bit of permission wrangling. We had to go and seek explicit permission from a lot of folks to get that done. OTN is the OBIS node for electronically tagged animal movement data. So I was having a conversation with Kim wearing a different hat than I usually have. So we're responsible for publishing this data into OBIS as OTN, and we participate in the OBIS community in building the standard that this data is published to. So we have this common format, we have this intercompatibility, so we can create these archives against any of the OTN compatible nodes as long as the permissions are right to do so. So you'll notice that most of the projects that are already published to OBIS are deeply Canadian. The OTN side, the permissions are such that we can have participation in OBIS without having to do a bunch of emailing around. We don't have that yet in the other regions because we don't have sharing of location data for stations that detect your animals. And we can see that a little bit with the heat map of where the OBIS portal's currently published data points are. There are some folks that are climbing on board in the regions here, but for the most part, we need to create more opportunities and more outreach to folks who are able to contribute to this data set. And if you're curious about how the schema works, there's a QR code for you. Come see me on Thursday afternoon. I will talk to you for 2 hours about this, I promise. But it's probably not appropriate to do it here now. So the takeaway I want you to get, though, is that we've established and propagated a standard across all of the major networks to publish data in the same way. And that means you can go to OBIS and find a lot of tracking data that you might be able to use for analysis or to test a hypothesis without worrying about reaching into raw data or starting to email people around. So OBIS might be an interesting place to use as a data source. Give it a shot. There's a good amount of telemetry data on there now, and we're hoping we'll get more up soon. Um, the thing that we're teasing in Connie's talk with OBIS and with other archives, we're publishing from the perspective of the tagged animals. So the data that's collected by a project about its tagged animals are in one archive. We do that because the philosophy is each node has the most authoritative copy of each project's data. And when we go back and forth and we fix the metadata sheets with you, it's because we want to be confident we're holding this best possible version of your data for sharing within the community and for publishing it on the day you tell us that you need that to happen. So the forward-looking thing that I'll leave you with, it's our intention to empower the nodes again to be able to put together a package on a project-by-project basis that can be archived at NOAA NCEI. We've worked with the U.S. Animal Tracking Network. We've worked with Julie Bosch's group at NCEI to begin to scope out how we might do this. And the hope is we can design something that doesn't give them too much trouble to ingest, archive, mint a DOI for, and it'll have all the attribution and the contact information necessary to connect more people to the work that you did. This development work is waiting for a little bit of human capacity to come online, so it's going to start in 2025. We anticipate it's probably going to take about a year to design the standard. So Connie was alluding to the fact that it is going to be a long process, but the willingness, the eagerness rather, to do this is quite high. So I'm very excited to eventually be able to bring this capability to each network across the US. And we did it. That's it for me. Thanks for hanging in. I promise I didn't do too bad on time, but yeah, we'll hold questions. I'm a good texter if you want to go that way.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, if you have questions for him, you can talk with him in the chat, or we can get into more of this discussion during our discussion period, because that was a good lead in. So next, Joy Young from the FACT Network is going to be talking about how FACT has sort of helped create some tools for community level visuals.
Thanks, Kim, and thank you everyone for having me here today. Make sure I share my. All right, Kim, because I can see you, can I get a thumbs up that you can see my appropriate screen?
Yes, you're great.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Again, thank you for having me here today at the ACT meeting. I'm just going to throw a plug out there. Our FACT in-person meeting is next month, but if anyone would like to jump on that as well and hear a little bit more about the FACT network, because I'm really going to kind of gloss over our network in this talk. I'm going to talk about what we would consider one of our accomplishments in FACT, and that's with the support of SACORA and the Animal Tracking Network, is the development of a data visualization tool that was very creatively named the DAVID. And I'm going to kind of go a little bit long into this just so everyone understands the details of it, because what we found is that the scientists wanted to know the details and what our thoughts were behind creating this. There we go. So we created an online tool that displays distribution arranged by species and year and month based on acoustic telemetry detection. So this is for grandmas and teachers to go online, find out what's being tracked in their backyard in a visual way. They can, discover new and novel things. Fisheries managers can easily investigate it if there's any movement data available for a species slaughter for stock assessment. And with one click, they can get contact information for the appropriate researchers. So let's go into the background and context a little bit. So what kind of started this? So the requirement to share data is not new. Almost every grant has one or more questions about how the results will be disseminated to a wide audience. So this slide is an excerpt from the NOAA Sharing Directive, which many of you may be very familiar with and may have realized this language has changed over the last few years. So I'm not going to read these to you, but again, you can always go back and read it to you, but those are the excerpts to it. And the devil is always in the details. So as it applies to the directive in here, environmental data does include biological observations, and timely is defined as within 2 years, and data collected and what we've been told is interpreted as when receivers are downloaded. Notably, this is much less than the battery life test many of us use. And finally, the data exception does not include concerns over animal welfare or equipment locations. So many organizations, including SACORA, use the NOAA directive as their data sharing policy. And while this policy has been in place for a number of years with some changes over time, the enforcement of the NOAA and other data sharing policies have been, we'll say, a little lax. So let me clarify. Funders think it has been lax. So there's a growing movement to change the language or the teeth of the data sharing policies. So just for example, if you look on the right-hand side of the screen, they're comparing PAR compliance rate. So it's basically accessibility to data. And NOAA is much lower. So it's 23% compared with Department of Energy and USGS and NIH. So you can see those higher percentages. So NOAA has committed to wanting to bring up their PAR rates. So just think of the writing on the wall. Now, I feel like that kind of sounds like a stick, but let's just take that as we know that this is happening. We know funders are going to want this more. But there's also importance as scientists to want to get our information out there. So this slide was actually created by Beth Bowers. Thank you very much, Beth, for this. Our scientific forefathers shared these views. So that our science has most value when it's being able to be communicated to the public. So there are publicly accessible repositories. We've mentioned OBIS and things like that, but they're not very public friendly. Could you imagine trying to tell your grandmother or tell your mom to go to OBIS to look up some information? Or if your firefighter neighbor was like, hey, how's that bluefish doing? Be like, oh, go to OBIS and you'll find out. So these aren't very useful for the public. So can we make something that's useful for them? And we all love our numbers. So I will just summarize, you can read the numbers here. But the FACT Network, much like ACT, has amassed an immense amount of animal observation data. So how do we use that without giving away the location of an individual animal or a piece of equipment which is considered sensitive, and in a way that's useful for the general public to learn and engage with science and allow stakeholders to understand current research efforts? So by capitalizing on the FACT system as the data source to create the metric visuals, we did two things. One, visuals are updated every 6 months at least, or updated more often quarterly, along with data pushes. So this is far faster than any sort of publications that come out. And researchers can opt in with just a yes versus please submit your data coming in. So it takes a lot of the effort out. So how are we going to do that? So this is a highly sophisticated flow chart to show you what kind of happens. So it starts with using highly summarized data outputs. So we take raw data, which is the detections that are regarded as highly sensitive. We use several methods to group and summarize and then visualize that summary on a map. The summaries are not highly sensitive, but they are useful as they transform the data into useful information. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the journey and how we got here and got the buy-in from the FACT Network. So just to be clear, the users that we see is the general public. So this is a tool for teachers, managers, funding agencies, and lay people. This is not a scientific go in and try and write a paper off of something. This is something that is very user-friendly. So how did we plan for the DAVIT launch? So it was a long and strategic road to get the buy-in from the telemetry community. But since its launch, we've received extremely positive feedback from everyone involved. We're already on another version, which I will talk about. But we had a planning stage. So we did surveys of our FACT members because this was a whole brand new concept idea. We did multiple presentations at the FACT meetings. I've done multiple presentations at the ACT meetings too, if you get the drift. We went to about designing and redesigning this website. And then we had a strategy for basically how to implement. So first we had actual forms that people would fill out to opt in. Now we have it when people fill out their tag project metadata form, that's the text file. It has 9 questions on it. The 10th question is, can this project be displayed in the DAVIT? So we've made that process simpler. And it was originally launched in May 2022. There's the website, but honestly, if you just type in FACT DAVIT, it'll pop up. So to give you an idea, I'm not going to read all these, but these were from FACT members that said what they liked about the tool. So it was, once we showed them the product, they could easily see what benefits that they were occurring and how they liked it. I'll tell you, people have used it in presentations. People have cited this when they're doing grant proposals as how they're making their data public even before the requirements are. We were also committed to adapting to input. So there were concerns, and I'll talk about them because there might be concerns for you too. So the first was potential harvest. And they were like, well, are my animals potentially are in danger, or are my locations, or are my receivers in danger? So the locations are skewed and they're summarized by month. So you cannot find any individual piece of equipment or animal. They're worried about the misuse of data in a publication. So there's no raw data available, simply the summary and the visuals that I will show you. Does it fulfill grant requirements? It does not fulfill grant requirements for archiving of your raw data. So when we talk about NCEI, that type stuff, that's your whole data set. But this does satisfy reaching the public element or disseminating your information to the wide public. Would there be incorrect assumptions? So we improved our map legend and the website text to address that. They're worried about getting buy-in from managers. So we created an introductory letter that could be showed to managers to basically say, what are the benefits of joining? And also concern of usefulness in a riverine system. This is still out there. The maps work best in the nearshore and offshore areas. The rivers are still a little wonky. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the tech side of things. So really quickly, so we talked about this is range and density within acoustic arrays. So we have two options in creating that. We first started with A, taking a convex hull, moved to, doing an overall, and then we try and basically make the smallest hull possible. So let me show you what that kind of looks like for range. And then for distribution. So in the old ways, we were connecting between points, but it kind of gave that line across the water, which is, again, if you're looking at it for the general public, can be a little bit misleading. So our new way is to actually use the locations and use kernel density estimates. And then finally, there's a buffer, and then the polygons are smoothed. And then we add metadata, species citations, project information, and distribution levels for all those contours. So let's talk about resolutions. Visuals are coarse, and they're summarized by monthly increments. The locations are also slightly skittered. So this was an example we had because we tried to pick people with all different types of scenarios. So this is the one that studies a spawning aggregation in a very specific area. This would be very sensitive information. You don't want anglers going there and fishing your spawning aggregation. When we showed these visuals to that person, they were like, I feel safe with this. I do not feel that Joe Schmo Angler is going to be able to go down there and take the animal. So it is giving, again, useful information to general public, but it is protecting the science behind it. So let's talk about for the accomplishments. I already said a little bit earlier how we reconfigured the distribution. We added a receiver coverage map. Thank you very much for ACT and OTN working together with this. This is a very buffered map, but basically to give the general public an idea of where receivers are located. So it's like, it's not the entire ocean. We've added or updated language on the website, and we're adding project pages that link. Just for sake of time, I'll skip past this one too. So thank you very much. I think Bruce is on the call. He sent me some links, and this is some images from the next few slides are images from a talk that he gave last year as well. So there was a problem, and that is false detections. And love them, hate them, but we all have them. So in us developing the Davit, the benefits of doing it at the node level was that it was little effort on behalf of the tag owner, right? But that detection extract is still filled with false detections. So our idea was to be able to implement some sort of QA/QC at the species level at the node level. That does not take away any sort of detections, but helps flag them. So in this example, I'm showing you on the left-hand side, the red arrow is pointing to a tiny dot. That is for Atlantic sturgeon, and that dot, I believe, is around St. Thomas. That is not a true detection. However, if we don't have these QA/QC filtering abilities, you get that dot showing up, and then on the right-hand side, you would see what the range would look like. And that is not true, right? And we're not going to get to absolute truth, but we want to get to a closer proximity. So Bruce has been working very hard on adapting some elements of Remora to add these sort of QA/QC flags. So Bruce could chime in with more of them, but there's like a Pincock filter, there's a velocity. One of the other things we did was to have a student identify machine readable sources. So to do a sort of home range, so if those points are outside a home range for a species. So this is a snapshot of basically kind of like the end of a detection extract, and then it just adds these other columns to it. And this, by adding together your zeros or ones, passing or fails, you can set a level of certainty. So when we think about satellite telemetry, sometimes there's certainty around those points. This gives us kind of that idea for acoustic telemetry. So it's useful to all of the members, but it's useful to the Davit because we can say when we program in what information is pulled in, we can say, you know what, if it's on this scale, then we're going to kick that information out. So this is the same. This is looking at a visual of what those flags are for Atlantic sturgeon, the one that I showed you before. Again, that red arrow is pointed to the South St. Thomas, and it is orange, and that is considered invalid. So we could program that to say, just kick out anything that's invalid or likely invalid. And then we can display more accurate information. Again, it doesn't take anything away from the detection extracts that the tag owners receive. They still get everything, just with these extra flags. I do have a video that I think is going to be a little bit too long, but I'll just go through the beginning of it. So this is what the landing page for the FACT website, or for the Davit tool, which is the FACT website hosted by Socorro. Below it has a series of frequently asked questions. Those are all drop downs. I'm going to try and skip ahead. So you have species levels. You can do it by projects. You can do years, by month. You can change colors. You can add labels. Right now I'm playing around with cobia, and I'm looking at the density of cobia in all years in December versus all years in June. And because I like conformity, I'm making the June all red so that it's nice and warm. And you could layer different species together. You can do different time frames, anything like that. And let me, there we go. It won't start. So in the bottom right corner, you see there were citations. So those have been clicked on. This actually gives you information for what's being displayed so that stakeholders could contact those researchers. And then now you can click through for even further and then get to a project page. Okay, so that is a much longer video, but for sake of time, we're not going to go into it. So let's talk about the benefits and the applications for you all. So one, you can discover projects and personnel in your areas of interest. This has been really useful for like when people email and they're like, hey, I want to start tagging manta rays. Does anyone tag manta rays in your area? Like, go check out the Davit. You can do a drop down and find out what projects have been going on. You can access summaries of movement data often years before they are published. Even though this is not a scientific tool, we have had people do screen grabs and use them in grant reporting and things like that. And you can quickly visualize the temporal and spatial overlap of multiple species. So in summary, the Davit is a user-friendly tool that enables scientists to share information while protecting their data. And increased inclusion of tab projects will enhance the accuracy and comprehensiveness of the visuals, so providing a more holistic view of the range and distribution of aquatic animals. Just for example, between FACT and ACT, there are many species in common that are being tracked. So if we were to include that information, it would give a more holistic view of what we're seeing with the movement of those animals. So what are our next steps? So there is the grant is still ongoing to do some development of this. So completing our QA/QC implementation with the R package or the R Remora package, being able to put that in Jupyter Notebooks, which is how data managers process the data. Working on our home range, and they're fixing some links that are up there. We will be working on standing up our own geo server, developing a workflow to integrate other networks should they choose to. And also making the code for the Davit public, not the data, not the information, but actually making the code public so that it can be improved upon by other groups and it's not so black box. So with that, I will say thank you very much to everyone in the entire FACT network. And thank you again for having me here today to nerd out and talk about the Davit.
Thank you, Joy. That was great. All right, I think we will also direct questions to the chat, and we're gonna take about a 9-minute break. And we will come back at 10:50 to talk for more of a discussion period where, you know, some of these questions and things kind of can all come together in one place. So